Okay, and we're back with another video, and this time we're going to be discussing players as storytellers. Now, William Mims has recently tagged me in some videos that he shared on Google Plus that, although they deal with video games, could be very useful for tabletop RPGs. So, thanks very much, William. One that I particularly enjoyed was one about the roles of the player in video games, and I'll put a link to that in the description below this video. The video posits the idea that players, and not just the game designer or the GM in our RPG example, are also a storyteller, and that they're trying to tell their own stories using the palette and materials provided by the GM or the game designer. To use an artistic analogy, the GM hands the players a particular size canvas and a selection of colours, allowing them to use these to paint their own picture. Now, this really got me thinking. As I mentioned in one of my written blogs recently, I've noticed that one current trend in the RPG market is towards more rules-light storytelling games over the slightly more crunchier systems. Now, this isn't a universal thing. However, I've had many people recently recommend more story-based games, and it set me to wondering why this is. Personally, for me, if myself and my players are wrapped up in a tense or a dramatic story, I don't want to interrupt that to check on rules or look something up. My main aim, and for any game I have, is that I keep it entertaining as possible for myself and for my players. To keep that ebb and flow of the plot moving at a pace, to build up the atmosphere and to get the players interested in the game. Now, this isn't to say that everything has to be deadly serious in a game. After all, humour does have its place within roleplay, but it should be something that adds rather than subtracts from the enjoyment of the game. One of the other reasons I enjoy storytelling games is because, as the video William shared suggests, players should be able to tell parts of the story too. Not just myself, as the GM, or whoever happens to be the GM in the game that I'm playing. Now, what do I mean when I say that? Well, I mean that I don't just mean that they get to narrate their own player actions. Obviously, that's all part and parcel of an RPG. I want the player to be invested in the setting and to help me breathe life into it. And, as the main man said in his video on non-Bansian clerics, link below, players love stuff. And yes, they do. Players become more invested in the setting when they have helped add to it and enrich that setting with their own ideas, their own stuff. Handing over some of the storytelling to players isn't relinquishing or losing anything as a GM, it's actually making an investment in improving your game. Now, I'm going to wheel out my favourite game here, which is the Fate Accelerated Edition. Now, a person, sorry I forget what your name was, on the Fate Google Plus community wisely said that this is much more than a cut down version of the Fate core rulebook, and they're absolutely right. Fate Accelerated uses aspects to define elements of the character and how they interact with their world. These aspects take the form of phrases like ace fighter pilot, father of a murdered son, the last in the Rosarius bloodline, etc. And although these allow the players to claim some small dice pool bonuses in the game, their real advantage, as far as I'm concerned, is that the player chooses an aspect they're actually saying to you, as a GM, this is an element of the game I'm interested in, and I'd like to see more of it. And as a GM, why would you ignore that? Storytelling games, I've found, tend to be tied not to a particular genre as such, and they tend to have minimal rules. I think the first, what I'd certainly classify as a proto storytelling RPG game, mainly because of its very simple rules, would have been Advanced Fighting Fantasy, and I have one of the original copies of Dungeoneer there. And this was a simple fantasy game with very simple rules, but still, I very much enjoyed it when I first started role playing, and still think it's an excellent game now. I believe it's recently been released, although I haven't read the newer version. There are a plethora of books now which may qualify as storytelling games, and it's a somewhat nebulous definition anyway. Another favourite of mine is the Savage World setting. I have the Explorers Edition here, the smaller, less expensive version of the rules. And this is a bit more rules heavy than Fate Accelerated, but it does strike a nice middle ground between crunch and story as far as I'm concerned. So I urge you, give one of these storytelling games a try, hand the tools over to your player characters and see what wonders they build inside the playgrounds of your mind. They might surprise you and your game might be enriched as a result. If anyone has any questions or comments, or maybe you'd like to recommend another storytelling style game for me, I'm always up for reading some more as far as cash allows me to buy them. And I'd love to hear what you think are some really good and interesting storytelling games that allow both the players and the ST to collaboratively build their world together and the setting. I believe there's a game called Spark which does the same, which I've not read unfortunately. However, I'm hoping to get hold of a copy of that very soon and have a look at that. But if you have any more suggestions, you know what to do. Put them in the comments box below. I look forward to reading what you write.